Welcome everyone to the very first episode of Paranormal Directive 13, which actually just so happens to be being recorded during a full moon, which seems kind of fitting for a paranormal podcast. But this is your weekly paranormal podcast where the boundaries of reality are thinner than we care to admit. And as the residents of one quiet Midwestern town found out, things that lurk in the dark often leave us questioning everything we thought we knew. My name is Matt, and today we venture into a story that begins in the dead of night, where the ordinary became anything but. And in those dark hours, something appeared, something so strange and terrifying that it left the locals grasping for answers that still elude them to this day. What they saw and what they felt has haunted the town ever since. So stay with us as we unravel the chilling tale of a visitor like no other. It's October 1903, small town America. The Des Moines Daily News publishes an article titled, "Seeing Strange Things, Half Human, Half Beast, with Great Bat-like Wings." A dispatch from Des Moines, Iowa says that the town of Van Meter, containing 1,000 persons, is terribly wrought up by what is described as a horrible monster. Every man, woman, and child in the town is in a state of terror, and fully half of them fail to close their eyes and slumber except in the broad daylight. This is the Van Meter Visitor. Our first sighting comes from U.G. Griffith, an implement dealer. Now, an implement dealer is someone who sells like farm equipment, like plows and seeders and things of that nature. Now, he's woken up around 1 a.m. by what looks like a giant electric spotlight in the sky. Now, keep in mind, this is 1903, so while they have lights and things of that nature, giant bright spotlights aren't really that much of a thing, especially in a, coal mining Midwestern town. So annoyed, he goes outside expecting to find some, pranksters, kids, bandits, what name you, out there just kind of messing around up to no good. And what he sees, though, was a large, dark figure perched on a rooftop. So he goes to get a better view, and the thing just kind of instantly jumps across the street and disappears into the darkness. Now, he's confused. He doesn't understand what he saw, really just kind of hoping that he kind of imagined the whole thing and it was nothing. So he just goes back to bed trying to just write it off and go about his business. Now, the next night, Dr. Alcott, the town doctor, wakes up to a bright shining light into his window. And so what he described was a monster seemingly half human, half beast with great bat-like wings and a blunt horn-like protuberance in the middle of the animal's forehead. So you wake up with this light shining in your face, you look out the window, and this is what you see. So naturally, 1903, he grabs his gun, runs outside, and he shoots it 5 times. And this thing, it doesn't even flinch. So initially, Alcott assumed that he might have missed. You're shooting into the darkness at this dark figure, so he just figured he missed with the first couple shots, but he knows for a fact he hit with the last couple shots. And the thing just vanishes into the night. So remember, again, this is over 100 years ago. You can't go online searching for stuff. You don't know what's going on. You can't just call up your buddy and be like, hey, have you ever heard of something like this? So when you wake up in the middle of the night to a damn Pterodactyl from Pokemon shooting hyper beams in your window, first instinct is going to be to just shoot it. But this thing apparently is impervious to bullets. Clarence Dunn, the local banker, he decides he's had enough of this shit. He thinks it's bandits, someone doing pranks, trying to rob the town. So he prepares his shotgun, camps out at his own bank. Most of the night for Clarence is quiet, when suddenly he hears what appears to be like a strangling noise coming from outside the door. He goes to open it, he's looking at the door, and through the window to his side, a beam of light just blasts him in the face. Without thinking, he just shoots right through the glass, shatters the window. And again, this doesn't do anything to the creature. It just flies off into the dark. So what he does is he just kind of camps out, waits out the night. And the next morning, when he goes outside, he sees 3-toed footprints in the ground, and he decides to make a plaster cast of them. Kind of like your Bigfoot plaster cast of footprints, but this thing had like 3 toes. Now, I found a picture of this online, and I can't tell for sure if it's legit picture or not, but it kind of does the job. It shows you what it would look like. And it's basically like the T-Rex footprint from Jurassic Park where he steps in the mud when it's pouring rain, just a little bit smaller, just like those 3 toes like that. So this is what they found. So it's not a person. It's not a human. Now, the creature's spotted again over the next couple days. O.V. White, the owner of the local hardware store, is asleep in his second-floor apartment above the shop when he's jolted awake by this weird noise outside. He later describes it as like a rasping, metallic-y sound coming from outside, like someone was dragging chains over a saw blade. It's a very interesting description of what you're hearing, just this metallic, weird sound. So he looks out the window and he sees it, and it's perched on the crossbeam of a telephone pole. So like a giant bird just chilling out on top of the pole. And again, he does what everyone else in the story has done so far. He grabs his gun and shoots at it. But here's the thing, O.V. White isn't an amateur shot. He is a marksman, a crack shot. So he knows if he shoots, he's hitting it. Again, he shoots it and nothing happens. Like, it doesn't even flinch that these bullets are, whether they're like going through, like phasing through him or bouncing off, but still no effect on it at all. And then the weird part here is after he shoots at it, the air fills with this disgusting putrid stench. And it's so overwhelming that it just knocks White out cold. He just passes out on the ground from the smell of this thing. Now, luckily, White's neighbor Sidney Gregg heard it as well, and he got up to investigate. And he comes out and he sees the creature up on the telephone pole, and it starts crawling down the pole, but not like a bird or anything trying to fly away or something like that, but kind of like, he described it kind of like a parrot, using its beak to guide itself down the pole. And he watched it as it landed on the ground and then stood up to its full height right in front of him. He said it had to have been at least 8 feet tall. Then it lights up the entire street with that light from its forehead. Now, according to Greg, he said it was as bright as an electric headlight, which in 1903, having a portable light, something like this that could light up that bright, again, is kind of science fiction. They don't have portable 5,000 lumen flashlights back then. Now, as Greg is standing there watching the thing in the street light up the whole street with this giant light on its head, it turns and flies off over towards the abandoned coal mine in the area, which this in turn now brings us to J.L. Platt, who's a brick plant foreman, and he hears these noises coming from the abandoned coal shaft, which he can only describe as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for a battle. So the town at this point has had enough. Platt gathers the residents to get rid of this thing once and for all. And by midnight, they've got about a dozen armed men surrounding this mine where Greg had seen it fly off to. And then, sure as hell, they get up there, and here comes this creature out of the mine. But at this point, there's a second one with it. It's about half the size, so this thing's got its baby essentially with it in this mine. And these guys, they're not playing around, and they do the only thing they can think to do, and they just straight up unload on these two. And J.L. Platt now describes what they did as the reception they received would have sunk the Spanish fleet, but aside from the unearthly noise and the peculiar odor, they didn't seem to mind it, but they just slowly descended down the shaft of the mine. So again, we know bullets aren't affecting this thing, but they kind of figured, we got so many guns, we got so many bullets, something's got to happen to these things. But again, nothing does, and they just slowly work themselves back down into the mine and disappear into the dark. So the crowd waits out the entire night, waiting for them to come back. They don't show back up. So they just decide this mine is abandoned. We're just going to seal it off. And they brick up the thing and basically just bury these things alive in that cave. And then that's kind of it. They seal the creature up in the mine and they just kind of move on about their life. Now, we don't know if these creatures died in the mine if they were able to get out from, a secondary shaft that connected to a different mine, if there was a way out, or what happened. All we know is after they fired at them and they disappeared into this mine, they sealed it up, and that's it. We haven't heard from it again. But now the question still remains is, what the hell is it? So there's a couple different theories floating around there. The main one really is that it was a bird, which I'm not a fan of this one. They argue that it was just a great blue heron, which, for the record, it's about a 4-foot tall bird, has a wingspan of about 6 feet, a big bird. However, they get blamed all the time for different cryptid sightings and things like that. The Mothman, the Jersey Devil, others, they've all been blamed on birds. But they never quite seem to fit what happened. A heron is not immune to gunfire. A heron doesn't shoot a giant light out of its forehead. So this one, to me, isn't really one that really holds a lot of weight, but it is kind of one of the most popular theories out there. Another one is that it was just a prank, or, a robbery gone wrong. That someone out there had access to these early electric lights, and they were trying to either rile up the town or steal something or rob the bank in the night, something of that nature. But again, it doesn't really explain how this thing was bulletproof or the size of the thing. 8 feet tall, yeah, there's some people out there who are 8 feet tall, I think. But again, are they robbing towns in the middle of the night with giant spotlights on their forehead? Probably not. And then not to mention the odor that this thing released. Now, there are mining helmets that rely on a chemical reaction of gas to burn to emit the light that do release a really awful smell, which could explain the smell that White had smelled that knocked him out. But the problem with that also is, one, they're not as bright as these spotlights that they're trying to say. And two, this is a mining town. Van Meter was built around coal mines, and most of these people have probably already seen this type of helmet before and would recognize the smell, because it's a pretty unique smell to the reaction that's made in these. You would think that they would notice that or relate to that and be able to say, like, oh yeah, it smelled like a mining helmet. So then we get into the mass hysteria theory, which is that, UG Griffith saw something the first night, kind of weirded him out. He told a couple people, which just snowballed into people thinking they were seeing things and hearing things, and the story going around. And well, I know this happens. I don't really like that in this situation. For one, UG Griffith, he just went to bed. He didn't really say anything. And then multiple people saw this at the same time without really being prompted. They come back with very similar stories without, talking to each other first and seeing what's going on. So I'm not a huge fan of the mass hysteria theory for this as well. And then we get into the theory that it's real. Whatever this thing was really was in Van Meter, terrorizing the town for a couple days, and they sealed it up in the mine. What it was, I don't know. There's a sketch in the book of the Van Meter Visitor by Chad Lewis, who went to the town to investigate everything and kind of study the whole history of the event. And it really, what it looks like is like an ancient pterosaur from, dinosaur times, prehistoric times. It just kind of hunched over with its wings on the ground, where, they got the hands on the end of the wings there. And then it's just shooting a light out of its forehead. So that's what it's described as in the book, in the sketch. And that's kind of lines up with what people were seeing. But again, we don't know what happened. None of the other theories really truly explain everything. And nothing else really gets us to a consensus of what happened. Is it a combination of the heron and mass hysteria mixed together, where like somebody, UG Griffith saw this bird, and then that story scared everyone else and they were seeing the bird, but they were thinking they were seeing something else? It's possible. The plaster cast that the pictures online, it's hard to tell if it's genuine or not. And really all we just kind of have are stories from over 100 years ago from a small town. And Was this stories perpetuated to try and bring relevance to the town? Or is it something that actually happened to these people? Now, the one thing I do know is that the town still to this day holds the Van Meter Visitor Festival every fall. So you can go to the town, walk around, hear the stories, see the exhibits, and just try to uncover some other information about it. So, in all honesty, what we need to do is we need to go to Van Meter, we need to find the mine, we need to unseal it and go look. We're either going to find, the skeletons of these things, or they're going to be there. And then we'll have the whole another world of how do we get rid of these things now, because we know they don't react to being shot, or they're just not there. And then that leads into a whole bunch of other questions of where did it go? What is going on here? What did they see? But also another problem with that is people aren't really sure exactly what mine they went into. They're not really sure where it was. Van Meter had, I believe, 4 or 5 different coal mines at the time, and then this was 130 years ago. The actual entrance to the mine they used has just sort of been lost to time. But that's it for episode 1, guys. If you like this episode, please go and rate us on iTunes or whatever your podcast app of choice is. It's really the best way for us to grow and reach new audiences and really support the show the best way right now. And then, of course, we're on all social media. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Paranormal Directive 13. And then please check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Paranormal Directive 13. There's bonus episodes. There are pictures of each episode that we're doing here on the podcast, as well as other bonus content on there as well. There is a free tier, and then there is a $5 a month founders tier where you get the title of being a directive founder and one of the first supporters of the show. And if there's anything out there that you guys would love to hear me cover and go in depth on and do some research on and do an episode on, feel free to send it over on an email, paranormaldirective13@gmail.com, where we can take a look at all your suggestions and put together some episodes for you guys there as well. But all right, guys, and just remember, if you're going to bed tonight and you see a spotlight shining through your window, it's probably just a blue heron.